Good evening, this is Harvey Ambrose, and I am bringing this message today on behalf of the Missionary Baptist Voice of Africa radio program, which is broadcast out of our radio station located in Monrovia, Liberia. We continue this evening in our study of the Gospel according to Matthew, and we come to chapter 6. Chapter 6 is, at least the way I see it, is divided into basically two or close to two equal parts. Verses 1 through 18 deal with three issues. The first being hypocrisy, the next being prayer, and the third being fasting. And then the latter half, verses 19 through 34, have to do with the choices that God lays before us on how to spend our lives. We can choose one thing or the other, and He counsels us as to which is the better ways. So with that brief outline, at least as I see it, I'll begin with verse 1, and we'll discuss, Lord willing, hypocrisy. Take heed that you do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily, I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father, which seeth in secret, himself shall reward thee openly. So, this has to do with our giving. The giving of our money, principally, is what's being talked about, though alms can, giving can be other sorts. It can be properties, it could be food, it could be clothing, whatever, but generally it's talking about alms, it's talking about money. We still give alms. Now, in the Old Testament, there was a set price for the support of the nation. It's like a tax. It was 10% of what you made. Some people teach that that's still a requirement. I don't find in the New Testament that is said to be so, nor are we today, when we give to our church, supporting a nation through that form of taxation. Nevertheless, Jesus says, God loveth a cheerful giver. Whatsoever a man purposeth in his heart, so let him give. So if God moves upon your heart to give money in support of the church that you're a member of, and you are glad to do it, then that is something that God accepts. So it has to do with what's on your heart. Why are you giving the alms? And this is telling about how you give it. So there's two issues there. The first is not discussed in this text. It doesn't talk about the heart issues, the inward, the inward man's desire to do it or lack thereof. However, the Sermon on the Mount does tend to reveal things that are written in the law of Moses, the law of God through Moses, the physical aspects of it, what can be observed or heard. But Christ gets into he goes past the physical observation of those laws and goes into the inward heart of man, and how God has, I hate to use the word, but how He views His own law with respect to not just the outward actions of a person, but He judges their hearts in their obedience to the law. The law talks about the outward part, but the and a little bit about the inward man, Jesus reveals more to us in the Sermon on the Mount. And we are in the 6th chapter, so this is chapter 2 of the Sermon on the Mount. There are 3 chapters altogether, 5, 6, and 7, that deal with this great sermon. I'm going to try to get back on track here, though. We're talking about alms. And generally speaking, this first half is talking about hypocrisy, whether it be hypocrisy in the giving of alms, hypocrisy when it comes to prayer, or hypocrisies when it comes to fasting. God hates hypocrisy. God hates hypocrites. A hypocrite is someone who does something to be seen of men. It's for show. It's to gain some advantage that the person thinks to gain that can only come from men, from this world, from being seen, rather than from the inward desire to do what is right. See the difference that God has called upon in the Old Testament to give alms, and the New Testament, and to pray, and to fast. Here, Jesus makes it clear that it's what's on your heart as you do these things, why you do them, that matters more, really. That the only thing that really totally matters is what is in your heart as you observe these components of the law. And generally, this again shows how impossible it is for a sinful human being, and we all are sinful human beings, to fully keep the law, for us to save ourselves by a proper keeping of the commandments of God. Because we can force ourselves to give, even if we don't want to, or to fast, or to pray. At times we have to force ourselves, at times it may be from the heart. But God rejects all that is not from the true inward man, and that is in a holy desire for the service of God by the keeping of the law in both our hearts and our bodies as we go forward trying to do them. We will fail in such observances, if not constantly, certainly here and there. In any breaking of the law, according to Scripture, the punishment for the breaking of the law is death. It's punishment. So, I just keep trying to get back on track. Let's just talk about, right now, hypocrisy as it bears out in the giving of our means, giving of alms, as people did at the time that Christ wrote them. So he says, you need to be careful. Take heed. So this is an instruction to us about giving. And it's not to be callously or superficially viewed. In other words, take heed. Be very careful to make sure what you're doing when you give something that's supposed to be obeying God in the giving of your money. We'll just say it's money, but it's not always money. It matters not that you give it, but what's going on, what your motivation is, what's going on in your heart as you give. We have to control both the fact that you give and what's going on inside. You can give, all kinds of people give, but to give with the right motive, with the right desire, with the right frame of heart and mind, that's much harder to control. So he says, take heed. It's a cautionary word. It means that God does not hold you guiltless if you give. Even though you're giving, you may give a lot. There's a lot of rich people that give a lot, and yet they're lost, and they're bound for hell. Their money does not save them from the punishment of God. In fact, it compounds the problem, because even they may have plenty of money, and therefore they're willing to give lots of money in order to hopefully, I guess, buy off God's good favor, as though you could purchase that favor with money, which is an absurdity, or or whatever. It's just that I'm having real trouble here. Just pray for me. Jesus says, be careful how you do it, because if you do it wrong, rather than making God happy or pleased with you, you will incur his anger, his wrath. It doesn't say that, but that's what it plays out in. So he says, take heed that you do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Now, there's always, a chance, if you're putting something in a collection plate, that someone will see you do it. But you don't have to do it such that they see how much you're putting in. Most of those, you could just put your hand in there, just drop it off, and no one sees the amount. And you don't want them to see it. We need to take heed that we don't let people know how much we give. Because if we're doing it in order to be seen of men, well, look at how much I paid. Look at how much I put into the church plate every Sunday. Look at me. I'm generous. If you're doing that so that men can see you, it says otherwise. So if you don't do it the way he says you will have no reward from your Father which is in heaven. In other words, God will not reward you. There will be no blessings from God for your having obeyed the commandment of giving alms. God's not going to reward you for that. So he says, therefore, so in contrast of doing it before men so that they can see you and men will praise you, he says, therefore, verse 2, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. Now, see, that is, I think that for the most part is behind us. I've never seen people that were so hypocritical that they would hire a band to come out and play trumpets to get everybody's attention to see how much money they're giving. However, I have heard people on TV, perhaps in person, I can't remember. I think I may have heard them in person, boasting about what they've given to God. It may not be for that particular occasion, but just like, at one time I put down $1 million to help build a new building, that kind of stuff. Well, you may not have, done anything at the time that you give it, but in retrospect, when you're giving that testimony to people concerning your own giving, that works against you, because God will not reward you for having given that money. So don't do it. Don't sound a trumpet. Don't bring attention to your giving. He said that's as the hypocrites do. That's why I say this is about hypocrisy. Hypocrites, those who want to appear outwardly to be good, but inwardly they have not been saved. They are not God's people. There has been no conversion of their heart. They are not the children of God. They seek to appear to be the children of God in the face of men. They want everybody to see them as that way. They may have even deceived themselves into believing that they're children of God. Look at your motives, and that will help you determine whether or not you've been saved. If your motives are to be seen of men, and you're not really worried about what God thinks, how God sees your heart in these exercises of religion per the law of Moses, then you need to be concerned. So, again, take heed to not give your alms, give of your means in front of people for the purpose of them knowing how much you've done. So make sure that you don't draw attention to yourself and to your giving in that exercise. He says the reason that the people, the hypocrites, sounded the trumpet and, before they gave in the synagogues and in the streets is that they may have glory of men. They want men to praise them for how good they are. And then he says, verily, it means truly. We talked about that before, where it says, let your yeas be yea. Well, Christ, this would be a yea. Yes, verily, of a truth. I say unto you, Jesus says here, such people, or they, have their reward. In other words, they want to be seen of men as being generous. And they are seen of men as generous. They got what they were seeking. They wanted the approval of their fellow man. Now, at first, that doesn't sound like such a bad thing. But see, the thing is, that will only last for a very brief time. And to what purpose? What difference does it make what people think about how generous you are? Before long, they're going to be dead. There will be no one to talk about your generosity. You'll be dead. There will be no praise coming to you. You'll be a corpse in the ground. And it doesn't last. You've given the money. That was a real thing. You have freely given that, with a purpose in order to go into the service of God here on this earth. But you did it so men could see you, and then it just blows away. There's no durable effect from it. In other words, it's foolish. He says they have their reward. But men saw them do it, and they got what they were looking for. But what they got was of no value to them. Because once they die, they enter into judgment with God. And God has been seeing what they've done, and not only what they did, but their motivation for doing it. Why did they give the alms? Was it so men could see them and praise them here on this earth? Or was it so that God would be pleased with their offering? What was their motivation? And it's hard to control motivation. It is difficult. Even when we're saved, we still dwell in physical bodies. We still have a physical brain. Our mind works at a physical level. And our motives are threatened to be just like that of anyone else. I find it helpful when I do anything that is supposed to be in the service of the Lord, that before I do it, whether that's giving or even attending church or saying something while I'm in church or preaching a message to you guys, I make it a habit to pray to God before I even begin to start to do it. That He would bless it with His Spirit, bless me in the thinking of it, and in the speaking of it, and in the doing of it, and to bless those who would hear or see me doing whatever I'm doing for the Lord, such that it all works out to His pleasure and to His glory. He's the only one that sees the heart and judges the heart. He's the only one that can. He is the only one that lasts. He's immutable. He never goes away. He's always there. And so whatever we do in His service, as long as our motivation is pure, in other words, it's our love of God and our love of man, if that is the motivation, in other words, God wants us to be a cheerful giver. If we can cheerfully give, then do so. And God will judge that. And He tells us what will happen then. It says, verse 3, but when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. So in other words, of course your left hand and your right hand don't have a brain, so they can't know, but it's just a way of speaking. In other words, it's like try to not even take knowledge of it yourself. When you give the alms, just give it without thinking about it. The Lord put it on your heart to give something to someone. Give it and be done with it. Don't tell people about it, for sure. Don't let people see it, for sure. Do it quietly. If it's possible, find some way to give it to the recipient without them knowing where it came from. That's not letting the light, in other words, it's not letting the information that you have given it, it's keeping that as secretive as you can possibly keep it. So when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. Verse 4, that thine alms may be in secret. See, he wants it quiet. And the Father, which seeth in secret, himself shall reward thee openly. God does not forget both hypocritical almsgiving and he does not forget the type that is proper, which is secretive and based upon a love of God, a love of keeping his commandments, and a love of your fellow man who may need the financial help. It's a hard thing to do it in which no one knows about it. It's difficult, particularly in the days when we give by check or something like that, or we give and there's people around us. How do you support something without someone seeing your name on a check or something like that? Not too much cash transactions in our country anymore. Maybe we need to go back to that. It'd be easier to keep this. But look at what at the end of that verse 4, what it says. That thy Father, which sees in secret. So no one else knows what you've made it a secret, but God knows what you gave. He knows why you gave it. And if it's in order to be praising him, he takes knowledge of that and will one day reward thee openly. Now, it doesn't say one day, but he says he will reward thee openly. Now, whether that's something in this life, maybe whether you know it or not, or can tie it to your giving, he's blessed you with this and that and made sure that you got what you needed. Who knows how he rewards you? But if it's openly, you would think that you do know. Somehow this is a thing in which he makes an open show of rewarding you. Well, I would take that to be at the judgment. Because at the judgment, nothing is secret. The hypocrites, they're called out. They're shown to be hypocritical. God will reveal to everyone that's in the judgment, which is everyone, the inward heart and motivation of the givers, whether they do it hypocritically or whether they do it earnestly out of love and out of regard for God and his law and for their fellow man. Only God can discern that, but one day it's going to be made clear to all, and there will be a reward given to people by God, both for doing it wrong. That's where he says, take heed. There's a punishment for doing it wrong, for being hypocritical in it, or conversely, for doing it right, out of a sincere, humble heart with a desire to help and to obey God. There will be a reward. It would be a good reward. Now, the reward for doing it wrong is punishment. The reward for doing it right, well, I don't know. It'll be a good thing. I don't know how we get rewards in the world to come. But the Bible says that we do, and I take it to mean that that's what is being discussed here. That thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. That's what I have. Good night.